In Access Module 2, we'll start the textbook project by downloading the start file and supporting files from MindTap. And then we'll open the starting file, which is Lakewood and your name. And then we can see in the navigation pane that it has a couple of tables that we'll use. Remember not to do anything with the grading info table. That is used by MindTap to handle the grading. So if you have a security warning at the top that says to enable content, then go ahead and do that as well, and then we can get started. The first thing we're going to do is modify the properties for this billing table. So we want to open this billing table in Design View. Remember, if you double click a table, it automatically opens in Data Sheet View, and so you could double click it and then switch to Design View with this View button. Or, I'm going to close that, or you can simply right click the billing table and choose Design View, and it will go directly into Design View. So either way, you want to get the table into Design View. And then we'll start by selecting this first row. So I'm going to click in the gray area to the left of the row. That's called the row selector, and it selects the entire row. And then we'll modify properties that are at the bottom half of the screen. When we are selecting a row up at the top, the properties at the bottom relate to that one row. So for that row, we'll start by changing the field size to 5. Right now it's set to 255 characters, but we know that invoice nums won't have more than 5 characters. We also want to set a caption to the word invoice space num. Now you're going to see throughout this module that for every field that has 2 words that are pushed together as the name without a space, we're going to add a caption that provides 2 words with a space. And that's because captions are what appears on as column headings for data sheets, and they'll also appear on forms and reports. So it's just common practice to not use spaces in the field name and then to rename it as a caption with something a little more pleasing and readable to humans. And so next we're going to select the visit ID row at the top. Notice the properties change at the bottom, and we can continue to use our mouse like this to move back and forth from the top to the bottom, or you can use your F6 key. F6, when you clicked up here on the visit ID row and then click F6, it jumps your insertion point down to the properties area. So we want to change the field size for visit ID to 4, and then we can tab to go down to the caption, and we want to change the caption to the word visit with a space and then ID. And then for invoice amount, we'll select it at the top, and then we'll click down where it has decimal places, and that's an automatic setting, but we want to force it. And so we're going to click in where it says auto and then go to the right where we have a drop down arrow, and we want to force it to have 2 decimal places for every value in the invoice amount. And we will also change that caption to invoice space AMT. Next we'll go to invoice date at the top, and we're going to change the format for the invoice date. So click in this box next to format and then use the arrow at the far right to see the format choices we have. And we want the one that is considered a short date, so it will show us 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, and 4 digits for the year. And then we're going to set the caption to invoice space date. And then we'll click on invoice paid at the top, and we're going to simply change that caption to invoice paid with a space. Oops. And no other properties for invoice paid. Invoice paid. And then I would take a minute and just go back and look at all the properties and make sure they're correct, make sure the spellings are correct. I clicked on invoice num and made sure that's correct. Visit ID, invoice amount, invoice date, and invoice paid. So then we're going to move the invoice amount field so that it's above invoice paid. We want to move it down one. So to move any of these fields, you would select it again by clicking on the gray box to the left, and then you can hold down your mouse pointer and drag. And we want invoice amount to come just before invoice paid. And then for invoice paid, we're actually going to insert a row above it. So we'll select the invoice paid row, and then we will use the Insert Rows button on this Table Tools design ribbon. We'll insert an empty row above it so that we can add an additional field called Invoice Item. And it's going to be a short text. So we type the field name in and press Tab, and it brings us to the data type. We want to leave that as short text. And then we can press F6 or move our mouse down to the bottom and change the field size to 40 for the invoice item and the caption to invoice item. And those are the changes we're going to make to billing, so we can save those changes and close this table for now. Next, we're going to change some of the properties in the visit table. But first, let's open it up in Datasheet view just by double-clicking it. And we'll see that we can change some properties in Datasheet view without having to go to Design view. We'll start that by making sure this first row is selected. And then we'll click in this Visit Date column on that first row. And notice up in this formatting group that the data type for this column is date and time, but it doesn't have a format selected. So we'll click in there and make sure the format is forced to that short date format. And you can see some other property changes that can be made in this Datasheet view, but we typically can do a lot more inside the design view. So we'll switch back to that design view now. And then we'll start by selecting the Visit ID row at the top, and we will add a description to this field that says primary key without any punctuation, and it's already set to primary key here so that Access knows it's the primary key. The description is just for us to read and to remember that that's the primary key. And then we also want to change the field size to 4 and the caption to Visit ID using a space after visit. Then we'll go back to the top and choose Patient ID. We'll add a description called Foreign Key that indicates that this field Patient ID will be used to relate this visit table to another table using that same field, the Patient ID field. And we'll see that in just a little bit. But we have a description of foreign key, and then for that same field for Patient ID, we'll go down and set the field size to 5 and give it a caption of Patient ID. And then for Visit Date, we'll select that at the top, and we're going to simply change the caption to Date of Visit to make that a little more clear. And then we'll go to the top and select Reason. We're going to change the field size to 60 and the caption to the word Reason/diagnosis, which is more descriptive of what that field is doing in the table. And then finally we'll select Walk-in at the top, and we will change the caption to the word walk-in ? And that's because this is a yes/no field, and typically a yes/no field asks a question that can be answered yes or no. So we're asking the question with this field, is this patient a walk-in, yes or no? Then we'll save this table, and we are prompted about some data possibly being lost. That happens anytime we change some field sizes in a table that already contains some data. But we want to continue, so we say yes, and Then let's switch to datasheet view. And the main thing we want to see here is that our field names all reflect the caption property that we just changed. They don't have the field names showing anymore. They have the captions showing. Let's go ahead and close this visit table, and then we're going to add some data to our billing table.